Okay, so for those of you who don't know us, the Rediscovery Centre is the National Centre for the Circular Economy. And through education and demonstration, collaboration and advocacy, we are aiming to help with the transition to the circular economy. So this particular event is part of our Circular Economy Conversation series, which is being delivered thanks to our partnership with the Environmental Protection Agency. And the purpose of conversations is just really to generate discussion about key circular economy issues and to help inform policy with the input of our expert practitioners who will be joining us for today's event. So we really do value your feedback, and we'd love if you could please post questions in the chat and engage with us that way. And we will, of course, have lots of time for discussion at the end. So tonight, our discussion is about how we can support the culture of repair in Ireland, and really specifically the community repair or repair cafes. As you may know, repair cafes have sparked the imagination across the globe, with over 2,500 or more registered with Repair Cafe HQ, if you like, since 2009 when the idea first took off. But in Ireland, since the first Repair Cafes in 2014, the rollout has been really slow. So what we were trying to do with this research is understand why. And in particular, we wanted to focus on issues related to insurance, because these come up again and again. To help with the discussion this evening, we're going to hear first of all from Brian Hanley, who's the CEO at Alliance for Insurance Reform. He's been doing some amazing work to try and bring down the cost of insurance across the board. We'll also hear from Fiona McCool, who's the Senior Manager for the Circular Economy Programme at the EPA, through which this event is taking place. We'll hear from Adam Boland, who's the Research Officer at the Rediscovery Centre, who's been carrying out this piece of work. And we're delighted to hear from Jeffrey Rowe as well, representing TOG, which is a hackerspace based in the centre of Dublin, and will share their specific experience of trying to obtain insurance for repair cafes. So following the discussion, there will be an opportunity for questions, as I mentioned. And before we begin, even, can you please just check your name and organisation is included in your participant name? And that will help us connect with others. And you're very welcome as well to introduce yourself in the chat and flag, I suppose, as well, your interest in repair cafes or lending services, which this conversation would also apply to, and anything you'd like to share about yourselves for the purposes of networking. Finally, as I said, if you have any questions, please add them to the chat. We will compile them and we will have time for questions at the end. Okay, so we'll get started. Our first speaker will be Brian Hanley. Brian's going to speak for 10 minutes. He's from Sligo and has recently taken over as CEO of the Alliance for Insurance Reform from Peter Boland. And before that, he led Human Rights NGO for 10 years. So Brian, you have the floor.
Thanks very much indeed. Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to be with you. I was very grateful for Adam having asked me to come and talk to you a little bit. So I thought maybe the way to approach it would be just to provide a bit of context about where insurance is at now and the journey it has been on to date, what reforms have come in and what the challenges are that remain. So I suppose to begin with, we're all well aware that it's insurance, the cost of insurance and access to cover have been really vexed issues in this country for a very, very long time. And so the Alliance was established in late 2017, early 2018, when a number of organizations got together wanting to do something about it because they just found it was crippling their businesses or their voluntary organization or and their sporting members. We have 46 members of the Alliance at the moment from right across society, representing about 1.7 million people. As I say, community, voluntary, sporting, arts, culture, businesses of all different sizes and shapes as well. And I think that just speaks to students as well, of course, and volunteers. So it speaks to the complexity of the issue across society. Around the time or shortly after the Alliance was established, when now Taoiseach, but then Minister for Enterprise Leo Varadkar, he was in Enterprise, he set up a cabinet subgroup to address insurance issues. And obviously the Alliance fed in where the reforms were that were particularly needed. I might touch on two or three of those and the progress that has been made in respect of those, and then maybe look and see what results have been yielded, and then what's left to do. So the first thing to look at really in terms of progress to date was one of the most significant things to happen in the Irish insurance market was in March 2021, when the judicial guidelines replaced the Book of Quantum. This is the book or the reference guide that judges, or indeed PIAB, the Personal Injuries Assessment Board, use in determining the level of awards to be paid for damages. And, you know, hitherto the judicial guidelines, the Book of Quantum was quite broad, gave an awful lot of latitude. So there was a wide, I suppose, disparity at times in terms of the size of awards that might be given for the same type of injury. The judicial guidelines, which were created by the Judicial Council, are much tighter. They align far more with those you'd have in other countries. And they have actually resulted in a 41% reduction in the size of awards since their introduction, which is quite significant. Now, of course, the guidelines have been challenged. And we're currently waiting on a Supreme Court decision in the Delaney case as to their constitutionality. We thought that the Delaney decision would have been indeed by the summer recess, but it wasn't, and there's still no sign, and we're coming up to Christmas. So we're obviously very keen to see, because the guidelines have made such a huge impact. And I'll talk a bit about that. We've had quite a few reports out in the last week about insurance. So you know, we're hopeful. We certainly would wish for the judicial guidelines to remain an integral part, given their effectiveness in reducing the size of awards, because often the reasons that are given by insurers as to why prices or premiums are so high or they can't cover is the volume of claims, the size of awards, and the stability of the market. Well, obviously, the judicial guidelines have tackled one of those in a very effective manner. Now, they're not addressing every case yet, because those cases that predated the guidelines will still be addressed under the Book of Quantum. One of the other things that has happened were the reforms to the Personal Injuries Assessment Board. And think as of today, it's the Personal Injury Resolution Board. They have, I think they appointed mediators, and the whole mediation system was the latest development today. Essentially, PIAB has been a very effective means of reducing the cost of settling personal injury claims. It adheres to the judicial guidelines, so the awards are going to be the same in theory, and I think in practice, as you might get in the courts, because they're all applying the same. There's no contest, and what you'll see is that the legal fees are significantly reduced, which is a particular saving then, because insurers aren't paying for legal fees. Ergo, we should be seeing a reduction in our premiums because of that fact. So last Thursday, I think it was, PIAB released its annual report for 2022. And they found that 40 million euro had been saved in 2022 on litigation costs. So it's a substantial sum of money. And I think the point I was making last week, as volubly as I could, was, where's that money gone? You know, all these reforms weren't introduced solely for the benefit of insurers. So, you know, they were introduced for the public, for small businesses, community groups, and so on, that would either have greater access to cover or would see their premiums come down. So it's suffice to say, I didn't get a satisfactory answer to the question posed, but I'll keep asking it because I think it's really important. The PIAB have seen other changes as well, essentially with the view they now will take psychiatric injury and stuff to keep more cases, because the issue with PIAB is, while all cases are the vast majority, there's some that are settled before PIAB, the vast majority go through there. Not all are settled. In fact, 70% of cases aren't settled in PIAB, which means we're really missing out on the savings that can be made. So we need to have more and more cases settled there. The third big reform in the last few years, and something that the Alliance signed on behalf of its members, which you all are, is a Garda, an MOU with the Guards, who they have an insurance fraud office which they established as, you know, part of our, I suppose, our advocacy on the issue, and indeed the insurers, was that there was need for a Garda insurance fraud unit, a fraud office. And so now for members of the Alliance, or indeed Insurance Ireland members, they can report issues around insurance fraud directly to this office. So it's like a one-stop shop. They will have greater experience then in seeing fraud cases than maybe if one went to a local station and they could decide if there's merit and it's worth pursuing and how to pursue it. They won't pursue it themselves. It'll go back out to the local station. But I think it's to be welcomed. Fraud is a tricky one because it's often used as an issue where, insurers will tell you it's as high as 20% are fraudulent or exaggerated, ergo we're not giving you any kind of a saving. But if you were to look at 2022 figures, 18,000 personal injury cases, I think there were, and there were 98 reported insurance fraud issues. Was that a third of 1% or something like that? So I'm not for a minute suggesting it's as low as that, but nor do I think it's necessarily 20%. And I think that what's actually needed and what the Alliance is really pushing for is that insurance companies need to better resource their fraud investigation and detection units. There's really only one that you hear most prominently in the news reporting about what they're doing in this area, because I think it's probably the best resourced and so on. And the other thing is there needs to be the attitude needs to be, we won't settle suspect claims. That has to be a thing of the past, because if we settle suspect claims, we encourage that kind of behavior. We keep paying for it. It might be slightly cheaper in the short term, but we're all going to be paying in the medium to long term. So that's another point I think that probably still has to be brought home. The last reform I talk about is around duty of care. And so this was a significant change. The Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, commenced a piece of legislation changing the duty of care and occupiers' liability. And essentially, it requires people now to take a bit more care of their own welfare and their own health and safety on somebody else's property. So it's a common sense and proportionate rebalancing, really, of the duty of care. So the example I sometimes would give is, if I go down to the grocery store and there's a few steps down to the car park, and there are I can see the steps just over there, but I decide to take a shortcut down the grassy bank on a wet day, and I go and I slip and I break my ankle. Well, it's not fair or reasonable or proportionate for me to then sue the supermarket who has provided the steps. And it's that kind of common sense approach that we want to see. I mean, what we would argue now is because of the changes to the duty of care, the risk profile for organisations has changed considerably, and that should too be reflected in premiums. We've also seen the legislative changes have also made it harder for trespassers or people coming onto another property with the intent or indeed to committing a criminal offence to bring an action, personal injury claim. In fact, they'd need the leave of the court if they were on the premises to commit a crime. And the last thing then is the voluntary assumption of risk. And that's basically where we can assume a certain degree of risk. So if I know, if I want to go play five-a-side soccer this evening, I can assume that risk. I don't need to sign a form by attending and understanding and knowing where I'm going as a grown man that there's a slightly higher risk. Well, assuming the pitch is in good nick, if I mistime a tackle, as inevitably I would at this stage, and break something, well, then I can't turn around and sue the AstroTurf facility. And I think that's all very sensible and proper. And what we should be seeing is a reduction in claims volume because of these changes, and claims volume is one of the key things to watch out for. So huge amount really has been achieved. The alliances, these were some of the main goals that we wanted for members, and members said they needed. And what have we seen? Well, we saw in the Personal Injuries Assessment Board report, we saw a 41% reduction in the volume of claims since 2019, a 14% between 22 and 21, and a 41% reduction overall in the volume of claims. So they're coming right down. We have seen a 46, I'm going to go again, actually it's 41 again, sorry, a 41% reduction in the size of awards for general damages. In fact, Paya went on and said the total value of awards has reduced by 139 million euros since 2019, driven by both the change in value and change in awards. We've seen the number of personal injury cases going through the High Court. It's about a third of what it was, down from, I think, 660 to 220 approximately. So if we are seeing all of these reductions, and to be fair, so yesterday, the central bank released a motor report, and there'll be one on public liability and employer liability and property liability. It's a combined report. I think that'll be in January sometime. And so there was a reduction of 7% in 2022 in motor insurance premiums. And that, of course, is to be welcomed. It's a reflection, and there was, I think, in the 2 or 3 years previous to it, And so there should be. I think the argument I made is that why is it possible to make those reductions in premiums for motor, but it's not for any other type of insurance? Like, the volume of claims is the volume of claims, and it applies across all sectors as far as I'm aware. And the size of awards is down and will continue to drop even further as those legacy cases that use the Book of Quantum filter through. And I don't think there's a satisfactory answer to that. It was also interesting to note, in the context of all the reforms and all the reductions, the significant profits that have been made by a number of insurers in recent, this year, paying out healthy dividends and the like. So what does that mean? I think it means for the Alliance that the priorities going forward have to be, there are four, really. The first one is reducing premiums. Holding the government's feet to the fire, that they put pressure on insurers to pass on savings to policyholders across all types of insurance. The second is, and it's related to it, is the need for increased competition in which insurers operate. I think competition in the motor sector has helped and probably stimulated the passing on of some of the savings, but significantly more work needs to be done, I think, by the Insurance Competition Office in attracting new entrants to the market for public and employee liability and other types of insurance. And that's something that's a priority for us. And also working with sectors that can't get cover. That's the third one. Again, it's probably a competition piece, but also there might be a need for some other bespoke or niche responses in different areas, because it does hit particular sectors harder than others, whether it's community and voluntary, I think, in particular. And the last thing we're going to be running is an education and training program for people around insurance issues. There are priorities, I think, for the next year or two. But if there's any questions or anything else, Claire, if there's anything I missed, you can let me know.
No, look, that's fantastic. It's great just to have that summary. We will be doing questions at the end, so please pop any questions in the chat just so we don't miss them and you don't forget them. I think it's so valuable to hear about the work of Alliance for Insurance Reform. It's been a huge and amazing piece of work, not only for repair cafes, of course, or indeed lending libraries or anything like that, but for anyone with public liability in any type of insurance, like in the community sector. And it's so important to have someone out there challenging insurance companies and challenging premiums, and driving these reforms, which hopefully will see all of that come down and make it much more straightforward to obtain insurance. So thank you very much, Brian. Our next speaker is Fiona McCool, who's the Senior Manager, as I mentioned, in the Environmental Protection Agency's Circular Economy Programme. Fiona's team works on delivering the National Food Waste Prevention Programme, which you may have heard of, the Stop Food Waste Programme in particular, and the Business Facing Food Waste Charter. They also support the implementation of green public procurement by public sector bodies, fund innovation and demonstration for circular economy, advocate for the circular economy through delivering behavioural and policy insights, and deliver through partnerships, which includes the Reuse and Repair Partnership Initiative, which started this year and through which this event is being supported. So Fiona, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Claire. And good evening, everybody. And thanks to all at the Rediscovery Centre team for hosting the event tonight and for inviting me to speak. Appreciate it. So I do have just a couple of slides to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about the Circular Economy Programme and some of the work that's happening, especially in relation to repair. So we can go straight on to the next one, Claire. So the Circular Economy Programme, it's a statutory programme. It's led by the Environmental Protection Agency. If you don't know who we are, we're an independent public body. Our purpose is to protect, improve and restore the environment through regulation, scientific knowledge and working with others while living sustainably in a healthy environment that's valued and protected by all. So the Circular Economy Programme runs up to 2027, and Claire gave some elements of what we do, but we also have teams that work on regulation, waste licensing and authorization and so on. And then the next, if you click again, Claire, it just shows what the 7 priority focus areas are for the programme. And they're the same as what's in the EU Green Deal. So it includes the likes of food waste, construction, batteries, textiles, and so on. So next slide, please, Claire. So this is, there's many different iterations of the circular economy in graphic form. You might be familiar with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation one, or even, excuse me, the Circular Economy Programme has one, but this is one that the European Environment Agency have recently produced. And I think it's a nice one because it shows, you know, that big circle of maximum use of products and the importance of longer and better use of products. So that is reducing the demand for primary resources in the economy. So repair and reuse and, excuse me, repair, what we're here to speak about tonight, is central to that. So there is that increasing focus on repair at EU level and at national level. So you've got the EU Right to Repair initiative, which you've probably heard of in the news recently because it's been going through the EU legislative processes. But there is also really a big move around moving away from waste management and recycling targets to really focusing on waste prevention, of which reuse forms part of the processes, and something like textiles, which they've put out a proposal for changing the Waste Framework Directive, is going to have more of a focus on repair and reuse of textiles. So over the next few years, we're going to be seeing this coming through in our national legislation and in our national policies. So any activities that are supporting repair and keeping products in the economy for longer, such as repair cafes that we're here to talk about tonight, are very much welcomed. So if you'd move on to the next slide, please, Claire. I just want to go through a couple of results of a behaviour and attitude study that the agency published this year, but the fieldwork was towards the end of last year. So one of the ways that we work is through delivering evidence for circular economy that helps us to advocate for circular economy. And we have a series of behavioural insight studies, repair being one, but we've done them on textiles and food and reuse and plastics, for example. But here, just to highlight a few of the findings, this is a nationally representative survey of the population, and one of the findings was that self-repair of products isn't common. Only 29% reported self-repairing, and excuse me, that peaked among men aged 35 to 54 years. There was a real strong focus on men of a certain age being strong repairers in terms of the findings. But we also asked about repair cafes, and a really high 61% of people said they were interested in attending a repair cafe, which is really encouraging. But 12% were only 12% reported being aware of them, and 5% attending them. So hopefully now I can see that they're on, even online now here, there's quite a few people who are running them. These stats will serve as a baseline, and that as we repeat these studies over time, we hope they'll improve and increase. So the next slide, please, Claire. If we look then at the high repair group, so the survey identified that 16% of the population can be classified as high repair. They're the people that are most likely to repair and self-repair their products. Again, kind of came out strongly that there's a strong male emphasis here. 7 out of 10 of them are male. But these are kind of a strong audience to focus on for repair activities, supporting repair activities, including the likes of repair cafes, and being most likely to advocate for repair. So the next slide then, Claire, please, talks about Repair My Stuff. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with this website, but it's a publicly funded national online repair directory. And so it's been in place since 2018, and it allows you to go on, select a location and select a category of product that you want to get repaired, and it brings you to a list of repairers in that locality. And the idea is then to connect consumers and repairers in their locality. There was only 11% reported awareness for the website, so it's quite low, and we would like to see this baseline metric grow over time. So if you weren't aware of it before I've raised it now, maybe you'll check it out. encourage any of your local repair enterprises to register if they haven't already, and use it to find a local repair and tell your family and friends about it. So the good news from the survey is that almost half of those that were aware of the site used it, and 75% reported getting the item repaired. So that was positive. But in general, I think a key statistic that came out was that the awareness of repair services in general was quite low at only 15%. Only 15% strongly agreed that they were aware of repair services for the products they own. So I think that shows a low base of knowing where to go to get products repaired. And I suppose growing a repair cafe network and having regular repair cafe in local areas can support the repair sector as well. So those were just some of the key findings. I'll move on to the next slide, please, Claire. Claire mentioned that one of the ways that we work is through partnership, and through partnership with the EPA. Tonight's event is brought to you, and through the partnership funding, the Rediscovery Centre have been running repair cafes at their centre, the National Centre for the Circular Economy in Ballymun quarterly, and carrying out this research into barriers for repair cafe insurance, and bringing this network together tonight for this conversation. So really working collaboratively to remove barriers to reuse and repair is a really important aspect of our partnership work with the Rediscovery Centre and others. So I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight. So next slide, please, Claire. And this is maybe a bit cheekily, but I did want to bring some food waste prevention messaging while I have this captive audience, because I know those of you who are online last night are interested in wider environment and sustainability agenda, and you're probably working on a wide range of sustainability activities within your own community groups and social enterprises. So Stop Food Waste is the consumer-facing food waste prevention programme, and it has lots of information and tips on how you can prevent food waste. So we have to have food waste in Ireland by 2020, which is a big challenge, and everybody can play their part. So if you don't follow us on social media channels already, I'd encourage you to do so. We're going to have a campaign going live next week, or it's maybe even by tomorrow, on your festive food and how to plan so that you avoid food waste at Christmas time, and watch out for National Stop Food Waste Day on the 1st of March. So thank you very much, Claire, for the opportunity to present tonight, and I'll hand you back to Claire. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Fiona, for sharing, especially those surveys. Really, really interesting findings on people's both, I suppose, appetite for repair, but also levels of awareness, which hopefully, as you say, this gathering this evening can start to tackle. So our next speaker is Adam Boland. He previously worked at the DCU Sustainability Office, and before that obtained a Master's on Climate Change Policy Media Society at DCU. And we're delighted to have him working with us now on the research team at the Rediscovery Centre. So Adam has been leading on this piece of research on insurance barriers to community repair. So Adam, if you want to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Just thank you all again for coming out tonight. That's not the most fun thing to talk about in an evening, this insurance, so appreciate everyone who came out. So yeah, I'll just be going through some of the findings, but this project is called Removing Insurance Barriers to Repair. It's part of the strategic partnership between the EPA and the Rediscovery Centre. So just quickly go through what we're going to be covering here. So I'll introduce by just talking about what is a repair cafe, what insurance do they need, and kind of what are the problems and the risks involved. Then we'll move on to some of our results. So what did we do for this project and what did we find? And then we move on to the solutions. So we've split that into two, so it's general solutions and policy solutions, many of which Brian and Fiona have already talked about. So many of you probably know what a repair cafe is already, because many of you run them, but just for anyone who doesn't know. So the definition we've been using and sending to insurance companies is that repair cafes are typically free community events that primarily rely on volunteers to carry out repair work alongside members of the public on a broad range of products brought to the cafe. And the other thing to flag there is the educational element. So either you have the volunteers repairing something and they'll show the attendees how they're doing it, or you could have the attendees doing the repair themselves and the volunteers be there as a guide. There's kind of two models for that. And the environmental benefit, so the main thing is you're extending product lifespans, which you probably all know is very vital for a functioning circular economy. You're trying to keep things in the value chain. And then studies have shown that it's always less energy intensive to repair than it is to replace a product. And finally, there's over 2,600 repair cafes all around the world, so the cumulative impact is huge. So what are the relevant risk types here? So the classic one, first of all, is trips, slips, and falls, which Brian kind of talked about briefly. So that'd be covered by public liability insurance. So this is if someone comes into your repair cafe and they trip over a cable and break their leg, because they're on your premises and you're occupying that premises, then they can take a claim against you. So you need public liability insurance for that one. And yeah, in order to take a successful claim, you have to show that the repair cafe organizer did not take reasonable care to avoid the injury. So it's a negligence case there. And then the other big one, and this is the real sticking point, is fire risk. So this would be a problem with electrical or electronic goods primarily. So this one you'd need product liability insurance because you're taking your product out of the repair cafe to if someone would bring it home. So the example would be you fix a microwave, someone takes it home and it starts a fire. So then you'll be liable for that damage. And again, it's a negligence case, so it's still have to show that the repair cafe didn't take reasonable care to avoid the injury, but it would be a much higher requirement because it's a much more severe risk. So some of the product types that we've identified and the insurers have identified. So the big one is electrical or electronic goods. That's the highest risk according to the insurers. And the fire risk is the big thing there. But then there's also the secondary risk of electric shock if you've repaired it poorly. Bicycles is the next highest risk category. And the injury or the risk there is injury during use. So if you can imagine someone is cycling on a main road and the brakes fail after you've repaired their bike, it's a very small chance, but there's a non-zero chance of a fatal accident. So that's considered quite high risk as well. And then finally, furniture, it's the lowest risk of these three, but it's worth mentioning in the injury or the risk this time would be the injury to the repairer who's actually carrying out the repair, and insurers are particularly worried about that if power tools are being used, and especially if people aren't qualified to use power tools. So who exactly is at risk of legal action here? So the volunteer is not personally responsible unless they acted in bad faith, were grossly negligent, or acted outside the scope of the voluntary work. And if none of those conditions are fulfilled, then it's important to stress that it is the repair cafe organizer who will be personally liable for any damages. And just, I know that sounds scary to all the prospective repair cafe organizers there, but just to note that we've looked around online and we've asked various participants, and we can't find a single example of a claim being taken against a repair cafe. So the risk is relatively low. So you might be wondering then, why are the insurers so hesitant to provide cover if the risk is low? And keep coming back to this analogy of being afraid of flying. So if it's even though it's a very low risk of it actually happening, if it does happen, it can be quite bad. So to go back to the example of a microwave going on fire, if that's in an apartment block, you could have a multi-million euro case being brought against you. So if you're only paying a premium of 500 euro, the insurers don't necessarily see that risk as being worth it. So the next thing is that this doesn't really appear to be a problem anywhere else other than Ireland. So we wanted to get to the bottom of that. We asked the insurers why they thought that might be. So Brian's touched on some of this already. So one of the things they said is that there's a claims culture in Ireland, that the people are more likely here to take a claim against someone. The excessive awards, which Brian talked about as well, and the other thing they mentioned is inconsistent awards. So they were looking for predictability in the awards, and they were saying that even compared to the UK or similar countries, it's the awards are much larger here. And then the last reason why this might be just a problem here is that we're quite a small country, so there might not be enough repair cafes to make it economically viable to have a bespoke policy for repair cafes. And moving on to some of our results. So first of all, what did we do? So we identified 90 stakeholders for this project. We contacted 75 of them and interviewed 23 of those. And the interviews that we carried out here were semi-structured interviews. So we we had a question list, but we were happy to deviate from that if someone said something that we wanted to follow up on. And then we also did a survey of 8 repair cafes to assess the viability of a group scheme. And we contacted 40 insurance companies, which I'll get into later, and requested 26 quotes. So the first thing that we need to show was there actually, is this a barrier to repair in Ireland? So one of the ways we did this, we asked 19 participants, are you aware of any specific instances in which repair was hampered or prevented from occurring by the requirement of insurance? You can see there about 4 out of 5 people said they had heard of something like this, which reinforced the idea that this is a barrier. And the other thing to say is that all the stakeholder groups, so that's insurance companies and policymakers and academics, everyone has heard of something like this happening. So it's not just the repairers. Another question we asked was, what do you see as the main barriers to setting up a repair cafe? We asked this of the 11 repair cafes that we interviewed. As you can see, obtaining insurance came out way in front. So only one of the 11 repair cafes didn't cite this as a major barrier. And then the second highest cited barrier was recruiting repairers, which goes back to what Fiona was saying about people losing repair skills. So people are worried about, not being able to find a volunteer to actually do the repairs. And then recruiting visitors is a much lower barrier. So again, there is the demand for repair services, but there's not necessarily the supply. And then 4 people cited other barriers that weren't on our list. So just to go through them quickly. Retaining repairers. So you might find volunteers for your first few events, and then over time, people have different commitments. You start losing repairs. It's hard to replace them. The time commitment, so the administrative burden involved in setting up the repair cafe. Understanding insurance needs, and that goes 2 ways. So the repair cafe doesn't necessarily know what insurance they need, and then the insurers don't necessarily know what a repair cafe is, or how to provide cover for it. And then the last one is that there's no centralized network or directory, which if that existed, it would make it much easier to share informational resources, and then also to, as we'll see later, to set up a group scheme. That would be easier if we had some sort of network. Hopefully this will be the start of that. So another question we asked was, to what extent do you think the requirement for insurance poses a barrier to community groups looking to organize a repair cafe? So this rank it 1 to 10. How much of a barrier is it? This is just to find out, the extent to which this is a problem for repair cafes. So we originally asked 6 participants, and the average came out at 9 out of 10, so a very high barrier. But we realized 2 people were giving 2 answers to this question. So they're saying, well, if they're doing electrical repairs, it's one thing, and if they're not, then it's another. So for the rest of the participants, the 9 that we asked this afterwards, we split this into 2 and asked them to give 2 answers. So 1, if you do repair electronics, and that also came out at 9 out of 10, a little bit lower actually, because there's an outlier here. So as you can see, someone's selected 4 out of 10, and that was interestingly an insurer. So all the repair cafes were up 8 to 10 kind of area. And then if you don't repair electronics, how much of a barrier is it? And there's a much bigger spread there. It's the same 9 people answered this question. And the average went way down to 5 out of 10. So that kind of shows that electrical goods are seen by repair cafes as one of the problem areas here. And then just some examples of some of the kind of qualitative answers that we got. So we did a thematic analysis of some of these qualitative responses. So you took all the interviews, transcribed them word for word, and then split them up into segments and organized them by theme. So I don't have time to go through all of these now, but we'll send around the recording afterwards, and you can pause on this bit if you would like to read more of them. So what's the repair cafe's insurance problem? Just to summarize this kind of area. So the access and cost of insurance is the big one. The vulnerability to legal risk. So that's not just a problem for existing repair cafes, but can also act as a deterrent to people looking to set up new repair cafes that don't want to make themselves vulnerable. And then the administrative burden, which we'll come on to in a second. The insurer's repair cafe problem. So why are they hesitant to provide cover? So the big one here is predictability. That's the one that kept coming up over and over again. So insurers are looking for activities that are predictable and consistent, the same every single time. Economies of scale. So that's the problem, that the more repair cafes you have, the more economically viable it becomes to provide cover for them. But as it stands, there aren't many repair cafes. And finally, related to predictability is risk management. So this is any sort of measures that will make improve the health and safety of the repair cafe and make it more predictable by doing so. So to the administrative burden. So there's a large input of time and resources required to obtain a quote, as some of you probably know. And this isn't feasible for the average community group. So the evidence for this, it's supported by our own efforts to obtain a quote. As part of this project, we sent around 26 requests for quotes. And for quotes for product liability insurance for a repair cafe that's doing electrical repairs, just to be specific. So some of the stats here, we contacted 40 insurance companies, 33 individuals were contacted for interviews and 4 of them were interviewed. We contacted 26 for quotes and received no quotes. We had 10 quotes refused and 16 never replied. So we sent 81 emails and made 19 phone calls trying to get these quotes and interviews. So you can see it's a large input of time to try and do this. And you know, if you're working a full-time job and you've got kids and you're trying to run a repair cafe, that might very well be infeasible for you. So moving on to some of our solutions, and we've got them organized by some of the themes that we identified. So predictability, economies of scale. Apologies. So under the theme of predictability, one of the solutions we've identified here is professionalization. So this is just making repair cafes more similar to a professional repair operation. And this is something that insurers said directly that they would like to see. So some of the ways you can do this: liability waivers, so just signing a piece of paper when you come into the repair cafe saying the repair cafe doesn't take responsibility. Portable appliance testing. So this is just a machine that you plug into an appliance as it's before it leaves the repair cafe, and it just checks all the circuits and makes sure it's safe to use. This is really important to the insurers. They would love to see health and safety policies. So that's again tied to predictability. So it's making sure that everyone's doing everything the same way every time. And Repair Cafe Wales have a health and safety policy on their website, so you can take that one. It's very comprehensive. And then the last thing that was identified by our insurers was volunteer screening. So this is just checking your repairers before they start to make sure they have some sort of training, qualifications, or at least experience. And that's particularly important if you're doing electrical repairs. So then under the theme of economies of scale, we've got our proposed solution here is a group scheme. So we've been looking into this for a while. We were supposed to have Kevin Whelan speak tonight, who's been representing us to insurance brokers or insurance companies as a broker, trying to set up a scheme like this, but unfortunately he wasn't able to make it tonight. But he's very kindly offered to do a group call with anyone who's interested in talking to him or asking questions. So send me an email or into the chat here if you'd like to be involved in that. So what is the scheme in the first place? So this is a kind of a shared policy that all the repair cafes would be under one policy, and they would divide the premium between them all. So that's kind of basically how it works. And the reason insurers like this one is you can put in conditions for membership or qualification. So this is just everything we were talking about a minute ago about the professionalization measures. So you could say, if you want to become part of this scheme, you have to have liability waivers and PAT testing and health and safety, like this particular health and safety policy. And it just makes everyone more consistent with each other, and that makes it more predictable for the insurer. So there's 2 ways you could do this. You could extend an existing scheme. So something like the Tidy Towns or Men's Sheds would be examples of schemes that exist already that you could maybe expand the definition to include repair cafes. Or you could create a new scheme, but that would involve having a centralized organization. So you could either set up a new organization, like a Repair Cafe Ireland network, or you could use an existing organization. So as part of this, we surveyed 8 repair cafes who were interested in joining a scheme. One of the most useful questions we asked, as it turned out, was how much they would be willing to pay per year for insurance. And the broker who's been representing us has talked to insurance companies who said they'd be willing to set up a scheme, but the minimum premium would be about €15,000. So based on that and the how much the repair cafes are willing to pay, we did a little calculations and found that between 40 and 60 repair cafes would be needed to make this economically viable as it stands. And there's, we currently have 8 who are interested, but maybe there'll be more after this event of people contacting us. So there's a significant deficit to this minimum premium that we've been quoted. But it's worth saying as well that there is a possibility of getting additional funding to make up that deficit. And then also the more repair cafes you have, the more viable it becomes and the less additional funding you need. So if you're interested in setting up a repair cafe, please get on to us. So some of the challenges around the solutions, I'd say when I was talking about liability waivers, some of you are probably biting your tongue there. So the most common thing that came up in the interviews is they're not worth the paper they're written on. And the reason people say this is because they often won't stand up in court, so you really can't rely on them to, they don't make you immune. But they do have some benefits. So it deters people from making a claim in the first place. So if someone thinks that the repair cafe is covered legally, then they might not take a claim in the first place. And it can cost a lot of money to defend a claim, even if it doesn't go through. And it can't hurt as well as the other thing to say, there's no downside to having liability waivers. Portable appliance testing, the challenge around this is there's an additional administrative and financial burden. So it costs about €350 for a full day training course in the PAT testing. And then after you've done that and you've taken a day of your time and you've spent €350, then you also have to buy the machine itself. So that could be a few more hundred or a few thousand, depending on what you're looking at. So if you're an under-resourced repair cafe, that's, that could be a big challenge. And then the challenge around group schemes is, as we said, is the large deficit to the minimum premium, but there are ways of overcoming that. Now the fun part, insurance legislation. So this is some of that. So we decided to put these towards the end because a lot of these policies kind of act as solutions to this problem. The most relevant one is the Product Liability Directive. So this is originally from 1985, this original text, and so it was badly in need of updating. And now, thankfully, it is being updated in the next year or two. So there's a proposal out now. And it explicitly mentions circular economy activities. So the two focuses are AI and circular economy as kind of new product types in a changing market. And there's one paragraph in this that's really relevant to repair cafes, which is that under this directive, you're not liable for damage caused by a product unless you've made substantial modifications to it. So in other words, if you haven't made substantial modifications when you did the repair, then it's still the original manufacturer who's liable for any damage. So that sounds great. So what is a substantial modification? It's a modification that changes the original intended functions or affects the product's compliance with applicable safety requirements. So the first part of that should be fine. Repair cafes, you're not changing the function. You're just kind of bringing it back to its original state. Might get a little more hairy with the compliance with applicable safety requirements. But, again, if you're using manufacturer approved parts and you're just replacing a part with a part that's similar, there's no reason it should change the safety requirements. So there's a possibility that this could just, work, make the problem go away, but we shouldn't count on it for sure. Brian talked about this already as well, the duty of care legislation. So I'll just go very quickly through that. So just puts more responsibility on the attendees at the repair cafe. Reduces the risk of claims by making it harder to take a claim against the repair cafe. And the way it's done that is, it used to be in the old text, you'd have to show that the repair cafe organizer had reasonable grounds to think that there was a danger. And now you have to show that they were reckless as to whether there was a danger. So that's small change in wording has made it much more stringent requirements. And I think, as Brian said, they're waiting for the insurers anyway, are waiting for precedent to be set in the courts. So they're looking for a judge to throw out a public liability case and to cite this legislation as the reason why. And then they say they can bring down the premiums. The right to repair directive has been mentioned already as well. So this isn't as relevant as you might hope to the problem of insurance. So it's actually not mentioned anywhere, insurance for repair. But that is probably because it's a peculiar Irish problem. So if it's not an EU problem, there's not really a need for an EU solution. But what that does mean is when we put it into our own law in the next couple of years, when we transpose it, there is scope, because it's a directive rather than a regulation, to kind of change the wording or add things to remove this specific barrier. So there's a potential place where we can implement some sort of policy to remove this problem. And the last thing that Brian talked about as well is the personal injuries guidelines. So this recommends specific amounts for specific injuries. So payout amounts. And that's supposed to create consistency of payouts. And as we've seen already, the insurers love consistency and predictability. So this will hopefully bring down premiums. but they're guidelines, not rules, and the insurers we spoke to anyway were skeptical as to whether they would actually be implemented. So I think someone said the judiciary do what they want in the interview. So, yeah, and sorry, the other thing is that they're also waiting for precedent to be set in the courts for that to bring down the premiums. To summarize, so we need more repair cafes to make it more viable for the insurers to provide cover. So if anyone is looking to set one up, or you know someone is looking to set one up, please get in touch with us, or try and make a network around yourself for people to help you set it up. We need more predictability in repair cafes according to the insurers. So professionalization measures of improving health and safety controls. And we realize as well, saying this, that there is a tension there, because these are fundamentally community informal events, and that's at the heart of them, and you don't want to lose that. So it is tricky. But then at the same time, a lot of these are just health and safety measures, and that can't be a bad thing to be more safe. So yeah. The group scheme can be viable. It's not right now because there aren't enough repair cafes, and but maybe moving forward, if we can negotiate a lower premium or have more repair cafes or additional funding, there are ways and means of making this happen. And then finally, the legislation is moving in the right direction. So we've seen a few policies now that are kind of converging in the next couple of years. So hopefully, unless they all get changed in the process, we should see it becoming easier and easier for insurers to provide cover for repair cafes. So I think that's everything. Thank you very much for listening to me. Stop sharing now. That's great. And Jeffrey Rowe will be speaking next. So I'll just introduce Jeffrey. So Jeffrey Rowe works as a software and hardware engineer, and in his spare time he likes to make crazy projects like bubble machines, interactive games, and anything with LEDs in it. He co-runs Dublin Maker, an annual maker showcase festival, and Tog Hackerspace. And Jeffrey is passionate about community repair events. He's hosted and taken part in repair cafes all over Ireland and abroad. He's an active member of Engineers Ireland and currently serving as chairperson for the Electronic and Computing Division. And the last thing to say about Jeffrey is he came up in the interviews a few times. People kept saying he helped them set up the repair cafes, and he was called a guru once or twice. So without further ado, please take it away, Jeffrey.
Thanks very much. It's great to speak to you all tonight, and I see some familiar names who have all already had calls and videos and emails with to try and help them get their repair cafe up and running. So as Adam says, I'm from Tog Hackerspace. I see some of my fellow members here as well, which is also great to see. Just to give you a bit of background and to set the scene of how we got involved and how we came up and tackled various insurance issues. So Tog, it's a hackerspace. What is that? It's a physical place. It's a community of people who like to make things, who like to have a shared physical space. So we were founded in 2009. So we originally started off in a small office in the city centre. We started our life as just a club. So think of like your local GAA club or something like that. So we had members join and that sort of stuff. We took out basic club insurance, just general public liability insurance. We started doing workshops, classes, that sort of stuff. You can think of stuff like, soldering, knitting, sewing, lots of different kind of types of creative pursuits like that. Claire did mention that repair cafes started in Ireland in 2014, and we were over in Sandymount, and we were certainly volunteers in those early years as repair cafes started to grow in Ireland. And unfortunately, they kind of stopped. I think it was around 2016 or so, or a bit earlier, when the insurance issue came up around those sorts of things. So it kind of disappeared for a while. And then in 2016, because we got some legal advice about the nature of being a club and the liability on the individuals and not on the organization, we then switched from an unincorporated association over to a designated activity company. So this 2016 was the year that all these new company types came out. And so we decided to switch and make a formal company to try and change the way that we handle our insurance and stuff like that. So also in that year, we moved to a much bigger space. We got much bigger equipment, stuff like lathes, CNC machines, stuff that it went from the risk of a burn to a risk of losing an arm or something like that. So we had to change our processes, and went for a kind of formal company. But then kind of in 2020, kind of a disaster struck us. So we were very active people. We had a woodworking shop, metalworking shop, and then out of nowhere in October 2020, our insurance company then decided, our insurance provider then said, we're not covering woodworking anymore. There's not amount of money you could pay us. We will not provide you woodworking facilities. So this was a big stumbling block for us. We had a large membership at that time that used our workshop facilities and all that sort of stuff. And this kind of change in insurance meant we had to stop doing it. We had to say, you can no longer use those circular saws, or you can no longer use that to build furniture or for your creative passions. So from 2020, we're kind of stuck with, we no longer had the ability to, serve the mandate of our members and the general public at wide who used to come in to use our workshop facilities. So we spent about 18 months trying to find alternative solutions to this problem, and nothing really came about that. Then after looking around and a chance meeting at a conference, there was a person there who was a representative from the Irish Men's Shed Association. Like our particular group was, accepting of everybody, every age, that sort of stuff. But after talking to the Men's Shed Association, we did have a lot of similarities with men's sheds between what kind of services they provided, although they had a much more focus on mental health. So we decided to engage with the Irish Men's Shed Association to see about potentially joining their association and having access then to their group policy, their insurance policy. So we kicked that off in about September 2021, and it was a long process. We didn't hear back right away. It's a very small charity, so things move slowly. But also around that period, I happened to get an email in my inbox about ChangeX. We're launching sustainability funds for repair cafes in 2021, and then we thought, we were well aware of the problems that happened in 2014, and the real sticking point around electrical repairs, electronic repairs, and we really like doing that aspects of it. But we thought that we're somewhat capable people. I'm sure we'll be able to figure this out once we get the funding. Sure, money can solve all sorts of problems, and this ChangeX funding maybe could allow us to do that. So we went ahead and applied, even though we didn't have, the appropriate insurance in place. We thought, we could knuckle down and try and solve that problem. So the funding came through in kind of November in 2021, and so we were still working then furiously on the issue. We knew that PAT testing, portable appliance testing, would be probably at the heart of it. So even before we got an insurance policy, they sent me off to do the day's training on the portable appliance testing, and then go out and buy a device, so a PAT tester, and then go get it calibrated. And then luck would have it, I guess lots of paperwork and policy documents. The Men's Shed Association then let us join, and they approved our kind of membership in March of that year. So in March, in February 2022. And that then gave us access to start engaging with their insurance company and look to join the group policy. But our main kind of motivation all behind this was about the woodworking. But when we were talking to the insurance company, we said, "Oh, do you also offer product liability insurance? We'd like to add that onto our general public liability insurance." And then they go, "Okay, so what sort of activities would you be doing?" We gave a list of the things that we'd like to repair, the policies. So I pulled a lot of policy documents from the repaircafe.org, their waiver form, the procedures that you put in place. We looked at risk assessments, and then we're happy that the insurance company then let us, they let us buy product liability insurance. So that came into acts around in March that year, and within weeks we were running our first kind of second wave of Repair Cafe then in April 2022, and we have been just running them constantly ever since. So we do them. So we've taken part in about nine this year. So sometimes they're in our own premises, where we'll get up to 60, 80 people with about 120, 130 items in for repair in our own premises. We go off and do them at festivals, so the likes of Dublin Maker, or we did it recently at the Beta Festival down in the Liberties. We then work with some partners who are trying to get their own repair cafe going. So we'll go off to and work with different repair groups around the city to try and help them, have the critical mass of having a group of experienced repairers come to their first or second event, and give them that kind of momentum and agency to then go forward and have it. And then, so we do it all around the place. We really like doing electrical and electronic repairs. So the kind of procedure, the stuff that we have, so we do those types of repairs. We do kind of general household repairs, fixing gazebos, lots of different types of repairs. But I guess at the core of our certain repair cafe would tend to be the electrical stuff and the electronic stuff, but it might make us a bit different than other repair cafes. So yeah, it's been going. So we have about, on average, between say 10 and 15 repairers over the course of the day. We try and aim for kind of like a 4-hour session, and then and then we have a particular process of welcoming people, taking their details, then assigning them to a repairer, and we make sure to close the chain about finding out what was repaired. If it was an electrical item, then we send it off to a dedicated tester who's volunteering at the event, myself or someone else who's recently got their training as well, to go off. But there are significant barriers. We find when working with partners, for example, we did a few out in different universities, dealing with very large organizations and their insurance questions and probing policies and that sort of stuff can be challenging. It's hard those sorts of things to overcome. And then putting them at ease, and then especially when dealing with other different venues and that sort of stuff. But as I said, we've either those 9 that we've been involved with this year, they've either been in our space, in someone else's place, or at a festival. And we've really kind of sparked it on from that. But the barriers, I guess, is the financing. So like we're in a lucky enough position that the bulk of the insurance, the public liability aspects, are definitely are covered by our host organization, Tog Hackerspace. But then we try and fundraise at the repair cafes themselves for stuff like the add-on for the product liability insurance, the add-on for the PAT tester. Unfortunately, it has to be calibrated every year, so there's a fee. The initial cost of the device and the training was covered by that ChangeX funding, but we certainly do still have to fundraise for calibration fees and then spare parts and that sort of stuff. So we've made some strides, and we definitely have the insurance to keep going, and we'll certainly strive to do. I'm not sure if we'll do 9 next year, but in terms of the capacity of our volunteers and fixers, we'll definitely try and do in the kind of 5 to 6 sort of range going forward. I guess I'm just a bit rambling at this stage, so I guess we'll look forward to any questions you have in the Q&A sections about more detail of how we operate ours and what sort of insurance and that sort of stuff we do.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thanks both Adam, and thank you very much to Jeffrey. It's fantastic to hear about the journey. I think it's really useful for people to hear how you came to running so many great events, and also everything that you do to support other repair cafes as well, and repair generally. So thank you so much for coming on to talk. I think there's a lot of food for thought, and happily we have about 20 minutes for questions. So please do pop any questions in the chat or raise your hand to speak either. There is one question just in the chat at the moment from JRTHIEL, so obviously an abbreviation, about the general costs for a repair cafe session and who providers that I should approach. I'm assuming that's about the costs of insurance, but correct me if I'm wrong if you want to jump in, or
Yeah, that's correct. So cost of insurance, and who actually do you actually phone call to get the actual insurance? Thank you.
Well, yeah, Adam, do you want to take that from our perspective, and maybe then Jeffrey?
So yeah, we called quite a lot of insurers, and we got some forms that we were able to send back to request quotes for product liability insurance, but we actually didn't manage to receive any quotes for this project. So it's quite unclear who you should call to get the insurance. Hopefully we can get a scheme up and running at some point, and that'll make it much easier. Then you know who to contact to get added onto a scheme. But Jeffrey probably has more insights on this.
Yeah, just on the scheme as mentioned, we do hope to organise a call in the new year. As Adam said, just to see is that something people would be interested in. Can it go somewhere just to make it easier? Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, Jeffrey.
So the repair cafe, the person who's organizing then, if they don't have insurance, they're the person who's liable then if anything does go wrong, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah, so for us to get insurance was a multi-hop procedure. We first had to go through the application to be to join the Irish Men's Shed Association, which is probably outside of the scope for most of the groups here. You know, we met a lot of that criteria due to the other activities that we have that are outside of repair cafes. So our classes, our tools, our workshop, and the facilities we provide. And then we went to so their policy is provided by FBD, but they don't offer it outside of the group policy. Which is unfortunate because I've sent people their direction and then they told me quite clearly that no, it's only inside this group policy that they allow it.
Okay, thank you.
Matt, did you have your hand up, or will I go to one of the?
I did. I guess Jeffrey's answers kind of answered that, because I just wondered whether, Adam, in your exploration, would you have approached FBD in a group setting, or kind of with the group in mind, to ask that same question that Jeffrey's kind of asked?
So we did contact them to try and get a quote, but not as part of the Men's Shed, because we were trying to look for a policy just for a repair cafe, just by themselves, because like we don't want everyone to have to join a group like the Men's Sheds to in order to get insurance. So yeah, we were looking for a specific policy just for one repair cafe. But yeah, we contacted FBD and many others that people have told us were open. So Arrakis and Allianz, AXA, all these people, and yeah, we got nothing back. Hope that answers the question.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, it still kind of leaves me kind of hopeful that if we kind of bombarded them with requests, then I don't know whether that's realistic to think that it could encourage them to look into it more. But
yeah, I think it would, based on what they've told us. I think it would help, because one of their worries is if there aren't enough repair cafes and they take the time to create a bespoke policy for a repair cafe, they don't know if they're going to be able to reuse that. So I think the more they get asked about it, the more likely they will to provide it.
Great. I can see a question in the chat from Kay that maybe Brian, you could take. The question is, if you have hedge trimmers, you accidentally cut the cord, your next door neighbor happens to be handy fixing things. So they fix the cord, but do you need insurance to help repair that type of thing? In a repair cafe, it's communities coming together to fix stuff. How is it so different? Brian, did you want to take that, or?
Not sure now what the answer, whether it's quasi-legal advice. So the question was, if you get it fixed by your neighbor, how is that different? And are they?
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, I don't know. Don't you? If you were to create, it depends potentially, right? I mean, if you were to heighten the risk by your actions, and that was to lead to something. So if the neighbor was to do something, and instead of making it better, it made it worse and created a new risk, I would have thought that there's potential for problems, arguably. But really, it shouldn't come down to all those kinds of things, and that's not where we're going to find the answer. I think ultimately at that level, it has to be. I liked I thought Adam's report was terrific. Really terrific. And I thought there was some really practical things. I love the professionalization stuff. The solutions are really good, manageable, not overly burdensome for people who are busy or who are volunteering. And I thought there was some really good stuff in that. Blood boiled with some of the responses you got from the insurers, which just didn't hold up to any particular scrutiny, because the size of awards is coming down for a number of years, and the size of claims is coming down for a number of years. I do appreciate the stability piece. I'm not picking at that, but you know, they're rules, not guidelines, or they're guidelines, not rules. Fair enough, but there's pretty good evidence to show they're being adhered to, which is why the size of awards is coming down. So I don't know that I'd be overly comfortable with that. And the duty of care one that came up, that well, until we see this a court case, we're not going to do anything about it, which of course will mean they get to kick it into the long grass for about 2 or 3 years, because they mean a high court decision. And no sooner will you have the high court decision and they'll say, well, this thing will be subject to appeal. So really you're looking at 6 years, lads, now before. I mean, there'll never be the right day of the week to do these things. I don't think that's acceptable. And truthfully, you know, the law of the land changed when the law was passed and commenced in the Oireachtas. The laws aren't actually made in the courts, they're made in the Parliament. And those things have changed. So I don't know that I'd accept that necessarily. But I thought there's some really good solutions. And I think some of the stuff, the health and safety stuff, and we're hoping to run some training programs as well ourselves around things like that for members as well over the next year in particular. So there might be sessions at different times that some of you guys would like to join, and I'll make sure they're passed through channels so you have access to them as well.
That's super. Thank you, Brian.
Sorry, Claire, can I just comment on this one? Because so the hedge trimmers, it's a classic repair that comes in mainly the summertime. And I think especially some of our kind of newer repairers who might not understand that, oh, I'll just, you know, join the wires back together, I'll stick them in a plastic common connector blocks, throw some tape around it, and sure, that's a repair and we're happy enough. But unfortunately, and it's usually my job at the event or the other person, that isn't a good enough repair, unfortunately. You know, we have to sometimes, especially we talked about the risk to life and fire, we have to go to a next level in terms of repair. So that might, you know, looking at our PAT testing and stuff like that, you know, you can't put junction boxes and stuff like that. You have to go and put, you know, a new cord in it or shorten the cords to the points. So there is your colleague spoke about the professionalism. So there is a bit of training or thought process where we have to go from something that you would do for your neighbor, as the commenter said, but we'll have to do slightly better when we're doing it at these events, because, you know, it wouldn't pass, you know, a PAT test if there was a junction box or stuff on it. So we do have to, you know, help our repairers, you know, come up to the next level in terms of the types of repairs that they do.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Just while you're there, you might be able to quickly answer June's question, and then I'll come to you, Irene, if that's okay. She was just asking, would your local men's shed be a possibility for cover? So
it's definitely a potential for cover, but they have to add the product liability as an add-on. It is so they have the public liability is the plain one or the ordinary one people tend to get for the policy, and then you have to pay an additional amount for the product liability add-on to the group policy. So I'm not sure if every men's shed out there would buy that, you know. And then it's taken. We talked a bit about administration burden. Unfortunately, for like PAT testing, there's keeping the records for a number of years afterwards. About, you know, so there is organizational burden. So it's not just as simple as, oh, we'll let you use our cover. Unfortunately.
Grand, thank you. Irene, did you have a question?
Maybe more of an observation than a question, but I'm just thinking, if it's easier to do something like this through the men's shed, should we not be looking at doing something more like that for the repair cafe, like have an association like the repaircafe.org have, you know, standardized forms, templates, maybe even a little short course that the repairers might have to take, you know, I suppose a way of standardizing it so that we don't consistently have to reinvent the wheel. So we've run a cafe in Escorty now, and Jack actually was there and very kindly repaired some things. Excuse me. And I suppose if everyone's kind of doing it, you know, and people are getting involved, every group has to reinvent the wheel every time. But if we have a kind of a format or a franchise to a certain extent, there's one main repair cafe organization, there's a group policy through that, everything is standardized, there's consistency. Is that not maybe a better way of looking at this? Then the insurance companies have less argument, and we're not all fighting the same battle on multiple fronts all the time.
Yeah, absolutely is. I suppose the problem with that is having the funding, or like who is the one who administers that central organization, and you know, if everyone's a volunteer, it's the extra administrative burden of setting up that central organization. But it is absolutely would be probably the best solution to this. Yeah, so like you could run a group scheme through that central organization quite easily, I think.
But I think it's not beyond the realm of possibility, like through Rethink Ireland or a social enterprise, that kind of approach could be taken. And definitely if we see this is only going to, like, we only want to keep growing, we only want to make sure that, you know, there's more and more repair cafes. I just kind of think, rather than this happening for another 5 years and eventually it happens, like, maybe we should just go straight into, okay, how could we work together to make this happen?
Absolutely. Claire had to go at something like this a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
I would just add 100%, Irene. I mean, I agree. If we can start like an umbrella one, and then each kind of area or county plugs into that, and as long as that repair cafe meets those standards, then they're up and running. They have the liability insurance. They have all the boxes ticked. The only thing they really need to do is figure out where they're going to hold it, so the venue, and who the volunteers are, and they're up and running. It should be easy as that. Otherwise, it's going to take forever. Thanks.
I'm not necessarily offering to do this, but I will say that I am involved in a social enterprise as well, and there is some circular economy and business planning coming up. So it's something I might suggest to the directors, that might be something that we could look into. And I think there's definitely funding available out there to get something like this started. So it's something we could consider.
I know you talked about the enterprise or commercial side of it. What if we somehow dovetail in the commercial side of it with the kind of community side of it, and then had both of them? And maybe that's the way to get it started. You know, just an idea. Because there's a lot of companies out there that are small enterprises. They may not have the budget. They might have a piece of equipment that's crucial for the business that is broken, and now they don't know how to get it repaired or whatever. And there's an opportunity there for someone local to come in and help out and get it going again for them. Just an idea.
I think as well, like, something that we're considering through the social enterprise piece is the training and development, like working with people who are looking to get back to employment, or who might have a natural aptitude for this kind of thing, so that it's not just a one-off. Like, the cafes that we've run have been quite successful. There is an interest out there, and anyone you speak to will say, oh, it's a brilliant idea, like, we should all be getting our stuff fixed.
Yes.
But there's not necessarily the function or spaces to do that. So, and then how we train, like, we're going to need more and more people trained with these. In some cases, they're basic enough repair skills. You know, they're simple things that help prolong the life of something a lot longer than it should. So anyway, I suppose there are things that we're thinking about, so I'll keep you updated on it.
That's great. Do definitely. And look, we can include all of this as recommendations in the report as well. I did just want to note as well, in Scotland, there is what is it called now? Circular Communities Scotland, which is a network for reuse and repair organisations. And there's something similar here, but in Scotland, just to say, it's that network that runs a share and repair network, and through that, I think they provide a lot of supports to repair cafes. So there's a model, I suppose. The Scottish network is called Circular Communities Scotland. It changed its name from Community Resources Network Scotland. And of course, there's an Irish network too, Community Resources Network Ireland. Yeah. But
so just
nothing like that here yet.
Just to add to that as well, Repair Cafe Wales is another interesting organisation. So they get funding from their government. So Wales is obviously much smaller than Ireland, but they've got about 100 repair cafes at the minute. And the reason is they have They have staff who are funded by the government who are able to administer this kind of central organization. So they have a group scheme for all the repair cafes that runs through that. So there are models for this. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of models there, and I think we can certainly circulate more information on that. Una, you have your hand up.
Hi, Claire. This has been really interesting and fascinating. And considering, like Adam, I've been ghosted by our insurance broker for the last, well, since March, when you approached me around the circular economy hotspot about our tool library, our lending library for tools and getting them repaired. And I still haven't gotten a quote. So that's just an update for you. But I would really be interested to know what the men's sheds are paying for their product liability, just as a ballpark. Like if we had some idea as to the cost of setting up a repair cafe, and that would be a crucial figure. You know, if Jeffrey's willing to share that, it would be really good. And if not, that's fine. I understand if he's not. But it would, you know, I think it might be useful.
Yeah, sure. I think the total amount is around €1,600. Is what we pay.
Good to know. Thanks.
And Adam, maybe you might just add to that. I think there was in the survey, there was a discussion around what people were willing to pay, repair cafes were willing to pay, and that's what the piece around the minimum premium was based on. So there was a quote for that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it was so we asked people to give a low estimate and a high estimate for how much they'd be willing to pay, and I think it came out around 200 to 400 per repair cafe is what people would be happy to pay. And so all the kind of policies that we've heard about, the prices we've been given of existing policies would be a little bit higher than that. So at the moment, you would need additional funding for a lot to kind of make up the deficit to the kind of policies people are offering.
Sorry, that's not per repair cafe event.
Sorry.
That's per repair cafe organization.
Yes, yeah. Per organization per year.
Yeah. Great. Okay, thanks. Fiona?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. It's just when you were referencing their Circular Community Scotland and Repair Cafe Wales and CRNI Community Resources Network Ireland, there's also the Northern Ireland Resources Network. I thought it was worth giving them a shout out as well, because they've done a lot of resources, as you know, for supporting repair cafes up in Northern Ireland. So it's even good for people to start to follow them or to yeah, exactly, go onto their website and see what they've done for repair cafe supports. Thanks.
Brilliant, thank you. I will share those links now in the chat as well. We can share them as well afterwards. Kate, do you want to say something there?
Yes, thanks. I was just wondering, I mean, obviously that number, like 40 to 50 repair cafes kind of needed in terms of the amounts that were surveyed, in terms of the amount that they would be up for paying. But I wonder if we could get a level of who we have now in terms of repair cafes. Let's say it's 15, and just see what that shortfall is, and just see, can we raise that money? Because I think that we could raise funds to meet a shortfall. I don't think it would be really difficult, to be honest with you.
Yep.
And I think if it means that we could hit the ground running and get the scheme set up, then over time, as we get more people joining, and it becomes less, let's say, cumbersome for them and off-putting for them, I think that to me, that sounds like it might be the most effective way to start, or one of the most effective ways.
I actually have some of the figures in front of me here. So I did do a more comprehensive analysis of that, we just didn't include in the presentation. So this will be all in the final report. So with the low estimate of what people would be willing to pay, assuming a €15,000 minimum premium, the deficit is about 13,350. But you know, there's different scenarios. So if given the high estimate of what people would be willing to pay, and assuming we could get a minimum premium brought down to about $5,000, it could be as low as 2,000. So there is quite a large range, but like the kind of medium would be about a €7,000 deficit. So it is possible, and the broker we've been talking to has heard in the past of group schemes where there was a deficit to the minimum premium and they got additional funding from external sources to make up the difference. So it is a possibility for sure.
because I'm sure there are businesses that would want to tap into this, you know,
Yeah.
the goodness and the ethical piece for this type of initiative, and it would suit them to pay $1,000 each or whatever it may be. Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. Sorry, Brian, did you want to add something?
Just one quick point, if I may, just to say, I mean, and I think this is absolutely the right approach in terms of the research and using your own agency and trying to come up with your own solutions. But just to flag then in the background, you know, repair cafes are one of a number of areas and sectors within the country that are struggling to get cover. And so we are also going to be looking, you know, at the best approach to tackling those particular areas. I mean, we were before in a Rock Committee a couple of weeks ago about thatched cottages. You know, they're required to maintain their thatch by dint of legislation as protected structures, but they can't get, about over 50% can't even get insurance cover to live in the house with their families. So they're in a particularly invidious position as well. So just as I think you're going about it absolutely the right way, but we will also be looking to pursue this on a different level, because there are a number of areas and a number of sectors that really struggle like this. So that'll be going on in the background as well.
Okay, well, I can't see any more hands up, and we're just coming up to past, so that's perfect timing. If anyone does have anything burning, just pop it in the chat and we'll be sure to come to it, but I'll otherwise bring this to a close. Thank you again so much for coming on a Christmas Paddy evening in a mad busy time, and listening to this, these experts talk about insurance and repair cafes. It's been really, really fascinating. We're always learning what's really happening in this area. We will be sharing the recording, as I mentioned, and we'll share some of those links again when we circulate that. As Adam did mention, we're hoping to organise that call in the new year, and we'll notify people as well about that with the insurance broker to talk about a group scheme. I've just popped Adam's email and my own email in the chat as well. Please reach out to us anytime if you have anything to add to this research or would like to share any of your own stories. And finally, thank you again to the EPA for supporting this event. Sincere thanks to all of our wonderful speakers for your contribution, and thanking you as well for coming along.